Okay, it seems that we can start at last, and even if some are still coming, but I think it's better that we start. Well, just a few words to introduce Professor Roelof Verhage. He's a Dutch professor, but teaching in Lyon. He's the head of the Department of Planning in Lyon. He's the guest professor of the section where we are working, which is more oriented as we are. I myself and my tutors, we are all planners and urban designers. The work we are doing is more oriented in this field, just taking the opportunity of having Professor Verhage, and as you will see, he will present some recent transformation projects in Europe, taking in account the themes that a planner has to take in account, that is the system of the actors, the system of the resources, and also the methodological approach to the redesigning of main transformation and regeneration areas. Well, thank you very much to Professor Verhage for being with us as a guest in the workshop, and then with the tutoring the development of the work of the students, and for the contribution in the conference. Well, I leave the table to Professor Verhage.
Okay, do you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much, Corinna, for inviting me, and all the people organizing the workshop here, for inviting a planner to an architecture workshop, which I think makes sense, but which is also a bit of a challenge to me to communicate, to present something that's interesting, also for architects. So what I want to do this evening, what I want to share with you, are some reflections out of a book we published last year with a few colleagues from University College of London, which is called Planning, Risk and Property Development. But the title we wanted to give to the book was what's on top of this slide: By the Market, For the Market, with a question mark. The editor didn't want that. Planners are not always very imaginative people. The editor said we need something that's clear about what you're doing in the book. So, well, okay, we wanted to publish it, so we agreed. But I use this opportunity to get back to this initial title again, because how do you say it? It's a bit the issue we want to address, and I'll explain how. Yeah, just one short remark. So, as a planner, I think one of the fundamental differences between planners and architects is that planners use text in PowerPoint presentations, whereas architects only use images. So I have a few slides with text. I hope you can work your way through it, and the images will come quite soon. So the starting point for our reflection is summarized here in a few points. Over the last 2 decades, there is a growing importance in European countries, growing attention to the regeneration of the existing city, the urban renaissance in the UK. All European cities agree on the fact that we can't continue to spread all the time for different reasons, and there's a lot of vacant land in the cities that we need to regenerate. So a growing importance for what they call brownfield regeneration. At the same time, an increasing level of quality required in these projects under the influence of sustainable development, for example, environmental requirements, requirements as to the quality of public space, of the realization of social housing. And at the same time, an increasing reliance on market mechanisms to produce these projects. And we speak a lot about property-led urban regeneration. The property market, in a way, what you do in an urban project is also produce real estate that's sold on a market, and if you don't manage to sell it, you don't have a project. These things together result in a situation in which there is a sort of a field of tension between, well, at the one hand, we have to create value in order to attract private investors to realize urban projects. And at the other side, we've got our public objectives in terms of social housing, in terms of quality of public space, in terms of facilities to be realized, in terms also of design quality of the areas. And how to deal with that field of tension. It's a bit the question we asked in the book, and we wanted to study several, we have studied several big regeneration projects in European countries in order to see how they dealt with this field of tension. Now, how did we study these projects? We used quite a basic sort of analytical framework, saying an urban project has a few central components. It's made in the interaction between a few components. The first one is the context. The context of a project influences what you can realize. So the second component of a project are its contents, expressed in structure, in form, in design, in the use of the uses that are there, the mix of tenure, in facilities. And there is a third component which is important, which is the organization of the project. A project is not just an interaction between a context and so what do we do? We look at the context and the project just emerges. A project emerges in the interaction between these three components. And depending on the type of governance, the partnership structure, the way in which risks are being dealt with, the contents of the project will not be the same. And the organization depends on the context, but also influences the context. There are mutual interactions between all these three components, and a project emerges in these interactions. Okay? So we had that in the back of our mind. In order to make this idea operational, and in order to synthesize a bit what we found for this presentation, we can resume things in this scheme in which we simplified very strongly, but which helps us to make sense of what we see around us. We said here, we take two central variables. We resume the context of a project by saying, does it take place in a situation where there's a high development potential or a low development potential? The idea of development potential is very complex, but it has to do with the capacity of a site to attract a private investment. So it has to do with the accessibility, with the quality of the area, with its location in the city. It can be decomposed in many things. And you can sort of intuitively, we all see that several sites have more development potential than others because of their situation, because of their location. So I'm not going to dig further into that here. We distinguish sites with high and with low development potential. And on the other side, the question of organization. We also simplify it very strongly, saying we see a big difference in sites in which the land ownership at the start of the project is predominantly private, in hands of private actors, or the land ownership is predominantly public. Now these two variables make it possible to distinguish in a sort of very schematic way 4 types of regeneration projects, of urban projects, which we gave a title here. So if the development potential is high, the land ownership is private, we're in a situation where projects emerge spontaneously. Property-led projects emerge spontaneously because investors are interested, they own the land, or they can deal with a private actor to buy the land, and the projects emerge more or less spontaneously, driven by market forces. in a situation where development potential is high and the land ownership is public, we can speak about partnership projects. In this situation, it's easy for the public authority to say, okay, we've got land, we need investors to realize a project, we can negotiate, we can give you the land in exchange for quality, and the planning authority takes certain risks because it can take in charge the development of the land, but in exchange, it'll attract private investment. If the development potential is low and the land ownership is private, we're facing a very difficult situation because the land is in private hands. A private investor doesn't really want to do anything there because development potential is low. So these are situations, we've called them the difficult projects, in which we have to convince the private investors. So there's a necessity to convince private investors to come there and to take on the project. And the last type of project, which I'm not going to speak today because I want to focus on these property-led regeneration projects that rely on private investment. But the last case, in a way, is the situation that you see in France, for example, in the grands ensembles, the big, large real estate, social housing estates, where land is public, development potential is low. Projects are being realized there, but they're very strongly, carried by the public sector. So public projects. So with this framework in mind, we went to see different projects, and we tried to figure out a bit how they functioned and whether in different situations, what you could identify in different situations as different ways of acting and different ways of realizing the project. So that's where we get to the pictures. I'll try to briefly present 4 different projects. So there's a lot, these are big projects, there's a lot to say about these projects. We're not going to enter into the details, but I'll try to highlight some crucial elements for each of these 4 projects. The first project I want to speak about is the project of Confluence in Lyon, which is a project that is situated, a large renewal project, situated in the heart of the city of Lyon, of the agglomeration of Lyon, close to or even directly adjacent to the historic city center, which is about here, in between the 2 rivers, the Rhône running here and the Saône running here. So it's what they call a near island, I think, in English, the presqu'île, which, as you can see on the next slide, more or less, so this is the project area, 150 hectares, so very big, the same size as the existing part of the historic city that's on the near island, but completely cut off from it by the railroad running here, which was realized in the 19th century, which is because here this is a hill, then there are 2 rivers, and only then it's flat, so it crosses the presqu'île at a level of 12 meters above ground level because it has to cross the 2 rivers, it can't touch the ground, so this is a big wall with only a few passages connecting this area to the central city. So this area developed in the 19th century as an area where all the functions that were necessary for a city, but that we didn't want to be bothered by, or that we didn't want in the city center, they took place here. So there were the prisons, there was a big marshalling yard for trains, the kind of activities you find behind a slaughterhouse, a wholesale market here. A tissue which was completely different from the rest of the city, and you can see it very clearly on this image. You see the grid structure of the existing of the historic city, and then this sort of industrial The activities in this area started to leave during the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, like in many similar areas where this kind of activities related to logistics and to transport, and there was the river harbor here, the railway, they went out of the city because the railway lost its function. Well, no, the railway didn't really lost its function, but the river lost its function, a big part of its function as a transport axis. The railroad became less important considered to car traffic, and all these functions left. So in the 1980s, 1990s, the area was very strongly underused in a way, and had a very bad reputation in Lyon because it was behind this big wall. So it was where all the, well, more or less criminal or unwanted activities took place, prostitution, drugs dealing, things like that. You didn't go there as a Lyonese. It was really a sort of almost a no-go area, at least in the evening. At the same time, in the 1990s, the then mayor said, well, this is a pity. We have this big area. Our city center is very cramped on this small island, and we could use this to extend our city. Made a first plan, which was very ambitious, reclaiming the whole area, the 150 hectares with a big master plan. Interesting in itself, but probably too ambitious to be realized. So in 2001, when a new mayor came into office, Gérard Collomb, the current mayor of Lyon, he said, no, we really need to develop this area. It's not going to develop itself spontaneously because its investors don't want to go there. We need to do something. We're going to start in a sort of pragmatic way. We're going to buy the land where we can, which means this part is a residential area. Was difficult to buy with a lot of different landowners. This part is the wholesale market that still functioned. So we're not going to start here. We're going to start in the area, the old river harbor, and some other activities around it, the old marshalling yard that are not used anymore. We'll buy all the land there and we'll start a project. So the municipality really engaged itself, took a lot of risks, bought all this land, 40 hectares in this area, and said, okay, so now we're going to develop a project here because we think it's an opportunity for Lyon to extend its city center. It's an opportunity to become, how do you say, to show what it can do in the field of urban development. And it's something we need. Lyon wants to be among the big European cities, try to obtain its place there. And this project was one of the elements for the mayor of Lyon to say, okay, we've got this big urban project. We want this to be realized. Now the investors at the beginning, the house builders, the house developers, the housing developers or real estate developers, they were in a way quite reluctant, and they really had to be drawn into this area, which the municipality did in 3 ways. The first one was by saying, we're going to make this a very high quality area. We're really going to change the image, which is expressed in the division between green space, public space, mainly roads, and only a small amount of space that was actually going to be sold to investors, to house builders. 40% of the whole area was going to be green space, places, parks, in order to show that, well, this is going to be an attractive living area. It's going to be very different from what we had before. That was the first thing the municipality, first element that the municipality used to convince house developers to get here. The second element was by saying, well, we bought all this land and we can sell it to you for a cheap price, house builders. We want you to come here. We think you can sell real estate here at some stage. And in order to make sure that you will come, we'll give you a reasonable price. We'll only ask quite a low price for the land, which helped to convince the investors. But what really convinced them to get here and to invest in this area, if you ask the house builders, they say what really convinced us was it was clear to us that for the mayor of Lyon and for the city of Lyon, this project was had highest priority. It was something that had to be done in order to realize the objectives, the strategic objectives of the city. So they were quite sure that this was going to work to some extent, and they were quite sure that it was a good way to promote themselves. And many of the investors who came here in the first, to develop the first part of the area really said, well, we didn't really know what to expect in terms of return on investment, but we knew that it would be a good, it would be good to be present in this project, because then we could say, look, we've taken the risk, we've done this, we are in this central part of Lyon, which will help to get projects in later phases. So in terms of, how do you say? Well, no, I'll just go to a last image. So this is what's actually realized in this first phase. And as you see, all this is public space. This river basin, which looks very, very authentic, didn't exist. It is dug out for this project and is part of this heavy investment in urban environment, where the city said, well, waterfront living is attractive. We want to create this ambience, this atmosphere. And the river only runs here, but we're going to make this, they call it a nautical place, a place nautique, a public place, but centered around a newly realized water basin. And the investors, the first ones, these were the first three plots to be developed, with quite important requirements also by the municipality in terms of architectural quality, which is of course always something you can always discuss about, but at least it stands out. It's significant what's been done here, and the area is a success. But it's a success in the sense that this is realized. The Lyonnese come here now. It's on the mental map of the people in Lyon, but it has cost a lot of money to the municipality. Little return and big investment for the public sector. So that's Lyon Confluence. Some elements, another picture which shows the quality of the urban space and the place that's given to it. Lyon Confluence. Let's go to another, because I also have to keep an eye on the time. Let's go to another project, a very different kind of project, also in Lyon, but much more to the outskirts of the city. What you see here is the peripheral ring road, so which more or less delimits the core of the city. So we're on the other side of the ring road, a bit outside the dense urban area, in an area, as you can see on this picture, which is also former industrial uses, very, how do you say, fragmented, not very attractive, and where an operation started with a private investor saying, in this area, I want to realize a large cinema complex. He wanted to realize it here because it's very accessible by road near the ring road. It's an area where he had some land, where he could buy land, and he said, I'm going to realize this big cinema complex. The mayor of the municipalities, this is not in the municipality of Lyon, the area is on the boundary between two adjacent municipalities, Villeurbanne and Vaux-en-Velin. The mayor of Vaux-en-Velin said, if you're going to invest here, I want to take this opportunity to turn this into a big, into an urban project, to do something here. So he started with the idea of making what they call a pôle de loisirs, a leisure center around this cinema complex, and trying to develop the area from there on. That was in 2000, 2001, 2002. Nothing really happened around it. This was under development, but around it nobody was interested because the area was far away, not attractive. And then another decision, all of a sudden, put this area on the map in Lyon, which was the decision to create to use an old railway track, which ran from the central station of Lyon, which is the Pardieu railway station, to the east, to use this old railway track to create a tramway link, a fast light rail link to the airport here, which meant that all of a sudden this area that was at the outside of the city was now central between the airport and the city center, quarter of an hour from both. This takes a quarter of an hour and then another quarter of an hour to get to the Pardieu station. And combined with that, the metro line, which runs from the city center and which stopped here, was prolonged, which was very easy because this was the maintenance place for the metros was already here, so the tunnel was there. It was just not open to the public, so it was very easy to prolong it, which created, which increased dramatically the accessibility and the connection of this city, of this area to the rest of the city. So development potential started to arrive. At the same time, the municipality said we're not going to do, we don't have the money, we don't have the political, this area doesn't have the political priority to do what we did in Confluence, buy all the land and take in charge the development. So we're not going to buy any land here. We're only going to try to make it attractive for private investors to come here. So the Pôle Multimodal was a public investment which made this area more attractive, and the multimodal connection between the tramway, the metro. The leisure center or commercial center, it's rather a shopping mall in the end, but it was promoted as something which would be a leisure center, was one of the first investments that should trigger further investment. The city worked on public space, improving the quality of the through roads, and that was it. And then it waited, in a way, it actively went to speak to investors, but it didn't actively start to develop anything by itself. With as a result that yes, the area is being developed, but in at the moment at a very slow rate. This is being realized now. So the commercial center, the leisure center, the multimodal connection between the tramway and the metro. But all this, which is supposed to be ready in the first planning in 2015, is far from ready. And there are some developments here now, housing, some offices. This is under project, but no real work is being done yet. And all this, we don't think about it. So things are happening, but at a very different speed than they are in Confluence, where the municipality took things in its own hands. So we don't speak about the later phases. We'll see when this is going to develop further. So this is the central place where the tramway meets the metro. The first office development in the area. But on the other side and all around this, the area is still very empty. And development is slow in taking off. Yet another project. With again a different situation concerning development potential, concerning land ownership. This is in Amsterdam, city of Amsterdam. It's a project that we already saw in the presentation of Jurgen Zijnstra. The Eioevers. It's the city center. City center of Amsterdam is here. The railway station is here, and it's the area behind the railway station, which is a former harbor area. In the 16th, 17th century, the opening from Amsterdam to the sea was through this way. So the harbor developed here. Over the years, this became unpracticable. Well, wasn't a good. Anyway, boats became too big to go this way, so we needed other solutions, which ended with a canal being dug out in the 19th century directly to the North Sea. And so the harbor activities moved to the west of Amsterdam. So this area became freed from harbor activities. The possibility to, became derelict also in the 70s, 60s, 70s, in the same period. Very near the city center of Amsterdam, a bit similar to Confluence in a way, and the possibility to make an extension to the city center. So the city of Amsterdam in the 1990s, we turned the map upside down here. So the north is below, the south, the city center of Amsterdam is here. The project all along these banks of the IJ, the former harbor site, is very big. Took a long time. This is the project that Jurgen Zijnstra spoke about. So for those who were there, it's one of the last bits that's been realized together with this here. The city of Amsterdam, during the 70s, the 80s, when the harbor activities left, also bought all the land in this area, which is a tradition in Amsterdam, municipal land ownership. So it had a very good possibility to, like in Confluence, to do something here. Moreover, maybe the development pressure was quite high in this area. Amsterdam lacks housing, and in particular Amsterdam lacks upmarket housing. So there was quite a pressure, quite a demand to develop this, and the city used that to say, okay, we're going to make this into something interesting, of high quality, with a lot of requirements in terms of design, as you've seen last Tuesday. Very precise prescriptions as to what needs to be done and what kind of development we want. Big requirements in terms of the realization of social housing. So the city had a how do you say, a list of requirements that was very high and needed investors to realize this. In first instance, it tried to work with one investment company in a sort of joint venture, ING Real Estate, a big investor, who would take in charge a large part of the area. In the end, that didn't really work out, and the city divided the area in a lot of smaller bits, working at each time with separate developers to develop this kind of high quality development it wanted, which resulted in what is no. The developers were quite eager to come because this is the city center of Amsterdam, because there is this pressure. At the same time, I mean, it's an expensive location. It's not easy with the water. The technical solutions are quite complicated. So the city also used the area, used some large public investment like this music, this concert hall, a big museum also in the area, to increase its attractiveness, to make it a part of the city center. And well, after that, private investors came and developed the area in a very dense way. The city wanted this very dense development because we needed a lot of housing. And it said, well, the view, the space is there. We've got the water to look at. So on the land that's there, we can develop very, very densely because the houses all have got this view over the water, which led to this kind of development of housing areas, 5, 6 floors, up to 8 or 9 in some places, and very, 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 how do you say? Well, very dense, very, very close to each other, the different buildings with interesting design solutions sometimes, the mix of social and private housing. That's also interesting. I'm not going to enter into any further. But the project did, well, that took some time, but that was realized by the investors in close cooperation with the municipality of Amsterdam, because Amsterdam had the money, had the land, and it used, well, what's particular for this operation is that Amsterdam decided to maintain the land, not to sell it to the developers, but to give it in land leases, which means that they rent it in a way. The house builders have the right to build their buildings on it, but the property of the land remains public, which is interesting for later phases. A last project we take a quick look at, and then I'll focus on what we can learn from these things, is Paddington Basin in London, in the east of the center of London. The city is here, Westminster is here, the Houses of Parliament must be somewhere here to find your way in London. Paddington Basin was for a long time the western, one of the main gates to London. The Grand Union Canal, which was an important transport way in the industrial period, ended in Paddington Basin. The Western Railway came to the railway station of Paddington, and together the the railway station is here, the canal comes here, and for a long time the area was completely filled with activities around the canal, around the railway station, which, like in all the other cases, disappeared during the 60s, 70s, and 80s for different reasons, and the area became not abandoned. We're still in the center of London, so activities were there, but underused in a certain way. And with this kind of industrial or logistic occupations that weren't functioning very well, or at least that were not in line with what you could realize in an area like this. Now in England or in the UK, the planning authority doesn't have the idea that it sometimes has in France or in the Netherlands, that it's its responsibility to develop an area. In the United Kingdom, development of such an area is the responsibility of private investors. It's sort of a starting point, at least since the Thatcher years, since the 80s. Which doesn't mean that the local council of Westminster didn't want to develop this, but it was by no way thinking of we're going to buy this land and do it by ourselves. It was creating conditions which maybe made investment possible. So during the 90s, the investors started to become interested in this area, started to buy different pieces. Well, I'm going to go through this quickly. Started to buy different pieces in the area that they wanted to develop and try to obtain planning permission to realize their development. Now so we're in London. Investors are, I should put it differently, this didn't really get off the ground until at the end of the 1990s. The property market all of a sudden started to boom in London, and investment in real estate became something that really interested the developers. And so then they said, okay, we've got this land in Paddington Basin, we can buy it, we can develop it. And the project started as a sort of spontaneous project in the typology I just gave, in that the developers didn't need any public intervention, but started to develop in this way, trying to put as many square meters of floor space in the area, because throughout the end of the 90s and the beginning of 2000, development pressure was very high, and at some stage they weren't really concerned with who would occupy these buildings. They were just wanted to build, because a building built in 2002, in 2006, it would be worth 30% more. So even without any occupation, it would be interesting. So a project that developed spontaneously, really driven by investors. Another picture. Now, and the municipality not having many means of influence in this project, only managed to say to the developers, well, you're making so much money here, we're creating so much value, we can reclaim part of it to invest in public space or in facilities. And so you've got some areas where the developers of the office buildings or the housing buildings around it have invested, have been forced to invest in public space. And then you get these kind of park areas or places. If you compare this to Confluence, I mean, it's not at all the same scale. At the same time, Confluence has cost a lot of money to the city of Lyon. Paddington Basin didn't cost anything to the city of London. It even got some money out of it. Now, what can we conclude out of this? In these kind of projects, public intervention has two objectives: creating value, making sure that investors come, and trying to capture a part of that value to invest in the quality of the area, either by buying the land and selling it at a higher price and trying to invest this money in the quality of the area, or to impose upon the developers to create some public space. The balance between these objectives changes according to the type of project. We've seen that in different projects the situation was very different. And the type of project in these 4 types changes in time, and projects that at some stage are not interesting for private investors can become interesting in later stages, or the other way around. So if we think about our 3 components and context, contents and organization, that means that if you plan for a development project, you have to be aware of this idea of what type of project are we doing, and how is this going to evolve in time, and what do I have to do at this moment in order to realize a quality development, or what can I do in later phases in order to realize a quality development. Now this more or less resumes this idea of projects have a trajectory. And so I put the 4 projects we've seen, and I started to put the 2 variables, land ownership and development potential, on 2 axes, saying development potential can be stronger or weaker, land ownership can be private or public, and that allows us to trace what happened to projects. So the Confluence, for example, started in a situation where development potential was rather weak, land ownership was mainly private. The municipality bought all the land, transferred it, and it ended up to become a situation, and then sold the land to private developers, ending up in a situation where development potential is rather strong. The land is now mainly in private hands. Carré de Soie also started in a similar situation, weak development potential, but then moved to a more attractive area for private investors without passing through intermediate temporary land ownership by the municipality. Amsterdam Eindhoven started out as public land ownership and became more attractive, whereas the land ownership remained in public hands. So you can see why am I showing this? If we think about property-led urban regeneration, in a way, our model is, or our idea is that urban regeneration takes place by private investors when the area is in this part of the scheme, when land ownership is private, when development potential is strong, regeneration takes place, and what the public sector tries to do is try to get, in general, what's flying around there? Is trying to get the project from the area where it is towards this situation. Okay, so with the exception of Amsterdam, where this land lease means that land remains in public hands. But what we want to do if we realize an urban project, at least in this idea of property-led urban regeneration, is to get it to this area. Now, how do we get it there? And that's my last transparent. No, my before last. How do we get it there? With different types of interventions. And in the different projects, what you can do is not the same. If land ownership is private and the development potential is high, project will happen anyway, and all you can do as a public sector is regulate, trying to set rules for the developers. Whereas, if you own the land, you can use it to negotiate with investors and say, okay, we'll sell this land to you, but only if you realize a certain quantity of public social housing or other objectives, or if you realize a certain design quality. And in that way you can, the organization of the project depends on the context, depends on the way in which the land ownership is developed, and in turn it has consequences for the shape of the project. And we've seen that in different situations what's being produced is not the same, and it does not only have to do with the site of the project or with its location in the city. The differences between the project have a lot to do with the organization and the role played by the different actors in this project. So that's what I wanted to get across, I think, as a message here, as a planner, speaking mainly to architects. In order to understand an urban project, you have to understand, of course, how contents and context are related and how they influence each other. But you also have to understand that the organization of the project has an important influence, and that you cannot do the same according to well, the governance structure, the way in which the actors are engaged in the process. So I hope, as I said, it's quite a different approach to urban projects as what we've seen in the other presentations. I hope it adds something to your understanding of what we see around us when we see the city develop. And thank you for your attention.